Now, contrary to our Mormon brethren, the American Indians were not the lost tribe of Israel. It didn't mean that they just got geographically lost. It didn't mean that their GPS was not working. It means that they were carried off. They were cut off. They were no more. They were no longer part of that chosenness that was the people of God. So it sounds very much like we've lost that promise, doesn't it? Except Judah continues. Judah remains, and the king sits upon the throne in Jerusalem, a descendant of David. In 38 kings, there's only 5 that are good, and all of them occur in Judah. The last of those is Hezekiah. Now, somebody questioned me a few weeks ago and said, so are there prophets during all of this time? Earlier on, we see that there's prophets that speak to David and hold him in check, that speak to Saul and try to hold him in check, that speak to Solomon, and well, we know where that goes. So where are the prophets? Well, there's this guy in the Old Testament named Isaiah. Isaiah spoke first to Uzziah the king, and then to his descendants after him, all the way down to Hezekiah, the last good king of Judah. And he speaks to Hezekiah's son Manasseh, but not without any success. Isaiah speaks over and over and over again, not of Israel's destruction, not of Judah's destruction, though he warns them of that. But he says, this promise will be fulfilled. This king will sit on the throne of his father David. There will come one after him, and this promise will always be fulfilled. But it's not for several hundred years, is it? Now, can you imagine if you're the prophet and you're preaching this word to people who really don't care, people who don't believe, people who are doing such despicable things as throwing their small children on cauldrons of fire in sacrifice to Baal, or raising Asherah poles in order to celebrate the goddess Asherah. You're the one preaching that God will remember. God will keep his word. You are falling out of favor with God, but God will always have someone on the throne of David. There will come a new king. Isaiah gives us more prophecies about the Messiah, about the chosen one of God, about the king who sits on his father's throne, on David's throne, for all eternity. We find more prophecies, more promises, more fulfillment in that one book, that one prophet, than we find anywhere in the Old Testament. Why? Well, our story is starting to transition, isn't it? And the mark of any good author, and God is certainly a good author, is that they take those transitions seriously. And you can't just go from the waywardness of the people and the destruction of the nation and then just leave it hanging. So Isaiah, over and over again, talks to them about this Messiah that is coming. And not only he, but there's 2 other prophets that are speaking during this time. We have Micah, we have Hosea. Now, for shortness of time, I can't go into all that they're saying, but essentially they're giving the same message. God never leaves himself void of someone to deliver his message. God is constant. God is true. God is eternal. God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and his message is the same. And it continues on. So what happens? Well, the 10 tribes are carried off into exile, leaving simply Judah and some of the Levites that serve them to carry on the name. And under King Hezekiah, now this is just to give you an illustration of what happens when a king actually does follow God. Remember, they've been pretty much beaten and battered and torn by every nation around them. And then all of a sudden, Hezekiah comes in at age 25. Of course, at 25, Hezekiah knew everything, right? Just like every 25-year-old, right? No. But Hezekiah does. He knows what's critical. He knows that God is in charge. And he believes that God can do whatever God says he will do. And God delivers him a message. It says, Hezekiah, none of the surrounding nations are ever going to come into Jerusalem while you sit on the throne. Now, that may not seem like a huge promise, but if you're this dinky little country and you've already seen all of your cousins and all of your brethren defeated in the north, and that country now is gone, and that same army is surrounding you, and you're outnumbered 100 to 1. Really? Is that the message you want to deliver to the people? Don't worry. Kind of the old Bobby McFarland thing. Don't worry. Be happy. God is with you. God will see you through. And he delivers this message, Hezekiah does, to the people. And the people listen. So the Assyrian army gets ready to go to war, outnumbering them 100 to 1, surrounding the city, and the charge is going to be led the next morning. They go to sleep that night, only to hear the moans and the groans, and then all of a sudden they get up in the morning, and 185,000 of the soldiers are dead and gone. Now, if you're one of those soldiers that are still alive, what do you think that does to your confidence? You're there, but the two next to you are gone. This God must be fairly powerful. And so they flee, they run. God fought the battle. God was the one who won the victory. God was the one who did exactly for Hezekiah what he said he would do. Now, that's an amazing story. The amazing part is this was available to every one of the kings before Hezekiah. But every one of them was so interested in holding on to their power, holding on to their grasp of influence, that they didn't follow God's direction. Hezekiah, it said, could pretty much turn everything to gold. Everything that he did was successful. Everything that he did was pleasing to the people. And so growing up in a household like that, you would think that everything would be good, right? Because genetically, we pass all that goodness down to our kids. At least that's what we think. Right? We're perfect, so our kids should be perfect, right? And, we're shocked when they're not. Hezekiah dies. His son Manasseh takes over. And as good as Hezekiah was, Manasseh was evil. Everything that he did displeased God. And so we're setting the stage for this final showdown. God destroys the Assyrian army for Hezekiah, but God leaves Manasseh to himself. And in the midst of all of this, Isaiah delivers these words of hope for those who are carried away from Judah in 586, which is the fall of Judah. He says, God is not going to have you stay in Babylon like he did the northern kingdoms. He said, after 70 years, God is going... Now, catch that. After 70 years. It's much easier and it's much safer to prophesy that God will eventually deliver you. Right?